Good day again. Dusty here with ETR Equipment, looking at a Bowie Lancer 600. We do have a features and options video already on in our library, so take a look at that. What we'll cover today is maintenance, daily maintenance and operations. So if you're in an emergency situation, you need to get out there and spray, and one of us can't get there before you need to spray, this is basic operation of how this machine runs, what you need to be doing on a day-to-day basis to make sure it's running smoothly and efficiently. So you know, that's what we'll cover, and then obviously we're here for any questions. Ideally, we'd like to get out there for the first tank of mulch you're spraying, just to make sure mixing and everything's done properly. There's some techniques that we go through in an in-person situation that are invaluable, and kind of some tips and tricks that we won't cover in the video. But first things first, when you get your machine, you want to look in your toolbox right here and grab your quick start guide. It's going to be this folder here, so it's going to show where your key is located. So all of your toolboxes here and your engine guards around the back side of the machine will be locked, and so this will tell you where the key's at, and then it'll kind of go through basic operations. So quick start guide. This video that we're doing will cover 600 and 700 gallon size machines. Each one of these papers, that may have 4 or 5 pages in here, so that's not just a single page. There are multiple pages in there. Some of them just have 1 page, but this will go through a lot of the stuff we're going to go through in the video. But instead of reading through it, sometimes people prefer a video. So this is going to give you the key location for your tongue toolbox. Your tongue toolbox is going to have a box that looks kind of like this. It's going to have your PO number on it. If you bought it specifically, had it made specifically for you, it'll have your company name on there. And again, it'll have your serial number and your MO number. Serial number and MO number, I'll show you where that's at. But this box is going to have your ball, all your nozzles in it, and it's also going to have a more in-depth set of keys, your operations manual on a thumb drive, and then a paper copy of your operations manual and the engine manual and everything like that. So this will be should stay in your shop as well. So for your numbers, for your serial numbers, your VIN numbers, your VIN is going to be inside the tongue toolbox. It's going to be right down here at the bottom of this one. So it's going to be a sticker. Then it's also going to talk about your tire loading capacities and that sort of thing. You may want to keep a hard copy of the engine manual in there. And then around this side, we'll see this side panel here. You'll have your serial number right there, and then what they call your MO number, which gives us a little more information in there. So first things first, before we leave the shop, before we get started for the day, we always want to check a few things, right? So obviously checking fuel. I like to use non-ethanol marine grade fuel in here. I think the engine performs better with that as compared to the ethanol stuff. We want to check our engine oil levels, right? So we've got our dipstick right here. Our fuel level, or our fuel port, is over here, right? You can also access your air filter right here. Screw off top here, and this pops off air filter there. So once we've kind of looked at all those, made sure everything's good, you know, we also want to kind of keep a visual look on our battery too. If we start seeing any kind of corrosion, we can kind of address that before it gets to be a bad deal. So the first thing we want to do is, you know, I like to do it before we even leave the shop, just to make sure everything's good. Give the engine a crank here. So got your key here, turn it, and just looking for a quick running of the machine, just to make sure everything's good, make sure there's no issues. It's starting good, so before we go to the job site, we always want to do that. on a bigger maintenance level, fuel filter here, right? Engine oil drain is right here. So you would take this out and then put this cap into a container and loosen it, that sort of thing. That'll drain your engine oil when you get ready to change everything. Your engine oil filter right here. Again, we just discussed the air filter there. Those are the main points. I like to personally like to grease the machine on the agitators and everything at the end of the day, so that after we've washed everything off and we grease it, we kind of push some fluids, push some water out of all those bearings and seals and that sort of thing. So we've got it's filled with grease, not water. I prefer red and tacky. I think it's Lucas Oil Red and Tacky is the brand of you just want a high heat, a high water resistant grease, that's there. We've got a bank here. You see it right there, it says grease hourly. So these things need to be greased. I would grease them every tank. So this is for your pump, front and back of the pump. You got 5 grease ports there. Grease those every tank, every hour. For more, right here, you've got your rear engine agitator bearings. So those are every day. That would be something that I would do at the end of the day, after everything's been washed off. Also got 2 grease points here. Those are also for the rear agitator bearing as well. So that one would be something you would grease at the end of the day as well. You do have a one right there. That's just for opening and closing the main tank valve and the flush tank valve. So you can grease that on a monthly basis. On a daily basis also, when this machine's running, I would put a dry lube. WD-40 makes a dry lube. PB Blaster makes a dry lube specifically for chains. Okay, when this thing's running, you can just do a couple of shots on there and get a good coating on there. You don't want a wet lube because it's going to attract dust and dirt, and it's going to create more problems. So there's the main agitator chain there, and then your pump chain right here as well. So both of those would get an application of WD-40 dry lube. Again, that's a lube designed specifically for chains and that sort of thing. Up on the front of the machine, we'll see there'll be a couple of more grease points, and those are also an end of the day grease point application right there and right there. So it says 8 hours on the grease. Here, we want 5 to 6 pumps. You really can't over grease them, but I mean you can, but just I would say be more generous than cautious with it. On the pump, I would use 2 to 3 pumps every hour. Getting an automatic grease gun that can be set to however many pumps, however many shots would be ideal. Milwaukee, DeWalt, they all make them, but they have some models have a setting where it'll only put 2 or 3 shots of grease in there, or an unlimited amount. So that's the basics on maintenance on a daily basis. When we flip over to operations, you'll have a few different things. Again, your manual, your quick start manual, will tell you a lot about what to do, how to get started. Again, it talks about the engine checklist, kind of what we went through, how to get started, some different things here for your fuses if you do ever get into any kind of fuse situations. Bypass valve, we saw that just a second ago. I'll show it to you again in just a second. If you're using the hose, it's always a good idea to maybe have that thing cracked. If you're using the tower gun, we can keep it closed, but some folks like to have it just at least cracked open just in case anything gets clogged up. Goes through your flush handles, your flush tank, which we'll cover here. So when we're filling our tank, you also have an operations manual from us, ETR, about mixing mulch. And so when we go to fill our tank, we obviously we'll put our hose in here, close this up, and then we want to make sure we take our little this one out, and so water can go into the main tank. We also want to open this valve, right? So we open this, and water can go into our flush tank right here. Now, when this flush tank gets full, what'll happen is the overflow will start coming out this hose here. So you may see it spilling out behind the tire. That's kind of where it would spill out. Once that starts spilling out, we want to close this down. Okay, there's no need for that water to keep draining there, creating a big mess. So we'll put some water into our tank, and then the next thing I would do after getting, maybe 50 or so gallons, maybe 100 gallons in to the tank, is we want to crank the machine again, and we want to spray some water out of the machine. Okay, so our tower gun's going to be located here for transport. Our hose is connected there during transport, so you see that's not coming from anything. This is not coming from anything. This is our main standpipe right here. This is where the pump comes straight up from the pump, and this is going to pump out our slurry here. Okay, so anything that we're doing is going to be coming out of here. So we put the phone down here for just a second and see if we can get the spray gun connected. Don't have any water in the tank, otherwise we would do some spraying, but what we want to do is make sure our spray gun is installed, and then we'll go down and we'll crank our machine at an idle, and then we will engage our pump at an idle, and we can idle up here and spray a little bit of water out of the pump and through the gun. Okay, now if we were using the hose that particular day, we would do the same thing in inverse. Put the phone down again here and show you. Disconnect the gun, put it back into its holding spot, transport spot, and lock it down. And then over here, we can disconnect our hose here, and we'll put it on here. So do it real quick. This just comes over, goes on here, and now we're spraying from the hose. Okay, so same thing here. If we were spraying from the hose for the day, we would want to put a little bit of water through there just to spray a little bit out, just to see what's going on, make sure there's no clogs, make sure there's no nothing going on before we get our tank completely full of water and mulch and everything like that. So when we get that completed, we can start agitating our mix. So again, we would crank our machine, we'd have our machine running, and what we want to make sure of is when we are mixing, we can get our water level way too high, way too fast. This is a guard that's in place so that nobody or nothing large falls into the tank accidentally while the machine's running, and things can go really, really south. So we would want to put our bell up here. We want to cut our bag open. We'd want to get flakes of it off. We want to do this when the water level is right at the agitator, okay? So we don't want this water level to get way up here and the paddles can't reach the mulch and we don't get a good mix. So ideally we want the water level to be below the agitator, right at the agitator. If we need to turn the water off, that would be advisable, rather than trying to load this thing and running out of time as the water level is rising and us trying to cram a bale in at the last minute and it floats at the top and it doesn't get mixed really well. And that leads to the pump clogging up and those sorts of issues. So we don't want that to happen. So as the water level is around the agitator, we'll flake our bales off long ways and get them down in here, chunks of them, get them down in here, load that machine, and once it's loaded with the mulch, you'll see that it gets pretty thick as there's half a tank of water and you're loading that fourth and that fifth bale into this machine. It's going to get pretty thick. So once we have that fifth bale, we're starting to unload that. We can start cranking the water back up over here and filling it up. We always want to load lightest to heaviest, so our seed would go in first, our mulch would go in second, and our fertilizer would go in last. And then if we're using any kind of tackifier, that would obviously be last as well. While this is going on, obviously these agitators are turning. Okay, show you where that's located at. The machine's on. There's two. So you've got two options here. You got a pump and an agitator clutch. So if you listen real closely, you can hear that. That's the pump pump clutch there. You hear that noise. Okay, that disengaged it, and then your agitator clutch is back there. So when we crank the machine up, we want to engage these. We don't want to run this pump dry, okay? We don't want to run it without water, okay? So we got a warning here, do not run pump dry. Okay, that means don't run it without water. It needs something to cool it off, otherwise it gets really overheated and it starts causing problems, okay? So we want to engage this pump and the agitator at a low RPM. So I'm going to go ahead and crank the machine up, and I'm going to engage the agitator, and then I'm going to go around and show you kind of what it looks like when it's turning. So may not be able to hear me. I'll try to speak closer into the phone, but I'm not sure how it'll come out. I want to idle it down a little bit before I engage. See, neither one of the chains are moving because neither one of the clutches are engaged. I'm going to engage the agitator clutch here. See, that will start turning. What that looks like when we get up in the, take a look at it from here, is the agitators are turning. We do have a little bit of a notch here. Just be cautious there. We always want to use caution when we're opening these bags of mulch. We don't want our knife to get down in there. We don't want to reach down in here. Okay, reach down in there. Obviously, something can get hit. We don't want to put anything down there. Loose clothing could be dangerous around this. That's why there's a guard, so it doesn't snatch you completely in. If you do ever have to get in there to do maintenance on the machine, you need to take this guard out. Obviously disconnect the battery, disconnect any kind of spark plugs, take the key out of it, have a second person with you. If somebody gets down in there, the other person can kind of make sure they're okay or call for help if something were to happen. So we're loading the machine, right, putting our bales in. This is mixing it. Water level's coming up. We want to make sure the water level gets here to the edge, and then we want to turn it off, right? We want to put this cap on here, put this cap on, tighten it down, and we can crank the engine RPMs up once we close this and lock this down. We can crank the engine RPMs up so that the mix really gets good and mixed up. So we would do that with the throttle here. That thing's spinning pretty fast now. Machine's moving around, got a lot of torque in there, so it's really getting mixed up now and getting ready to spray. We want to make sure no dry chunks are in there. We want to make sure everything's really mixed well. We do need to take a look at it. Sometimes these chunks are gonna float right around in here. Okay, so they could float turn up in here. We want to make sure, you know, all those dry chunks are mixed up really, really well. I'm gonna idle this machine down now. I'm gonna disengage our agitator. Kind of see it stop spinning. Right, the big flywheel there at the back. The chain, it slows down, it stopped. Okay, I'm gonna shut the machine off now, so you can hear me speak. Well, once the slurry is mixed up really, really well, and we go, you can leave this thing running when you go from the mixing point to the spraying point, I would say. What you'll see is that if you let it mix, it'll mix up real well, and do what it's designed to do, and you'll have the slurry ready to go by the time you get to the spray point. Again, if you're using your tower gun, you know, you'd want to put that on there. I wouldn't transport it too much. It can bounce around a little bit. That's why it's got a spot there for it. So once you get to where you're going to spray, you get your hose or you know, whatever pulled out to where it's to where you need it to be. If you're using the hose, it comes zip tied, you know, and this is your hose rewind right here. Didn't cover it, but you've got an emergency shutdown here. So if your engines ever won't crank, if this thing is pushed in, that's how you shut it completely down. So if you ever try to turn the key and nothing happens, and you've checked the battery, could be that right there. So that's got to be out for it to operate functionally. And so again, when we get ready to spray, what we'll do, our mix is mixed up. You know, we'll get up top and make sure that everything is functioning properly. You know, another thing that maybe I didn't cover clearly, but here we've got our flush tank and our main tank. Okay, so if both of them are open, then the main tank, or both of them are up, excuse me, the main tank is open and the flush tank is closed. Okay, if the flush tank, once we get finished with our tank or spraying out of our main tank, we're going to push both of these down. We'll turn our pump off, push both of these down, and then turn our pump back on to flush with fresh water. I can show that here in just a second. You know, I think we've got some water in the flush tank, but we don't have any water in the main tank. So anyway, so we'll get to where we're going, right? And we'll have our engine running here. You know, our agitator will probably be on. We'll probably still be mixing. Okay, there's a red light on when that thing's engaged. So again, up here we've got a couple of things. If the engine will not start, check the kill switch. Only engage these clutches at a low RPM. So we got our throttle here. We've also got our horn right there. So we'll have an idle throttle here, not real high RPM, and we'll engage our pump, and then we can idle up, and it'll start coming out of our standpipe here, whether we're spraying with the hose or we're spraying with the tower gun, and we'll kind of make our application, whatever area we're covering. So for this one, we covered that area over there a couple days ago, and we've got a good little stand of ryegrass coming up now. Once the tank is empty, again, you start spitting and sputtering when it's coming out. That's the end of the tank. You know, the tank inlet is at the back of the tank. So if we're pointing, the machine's kind of pointing up, that's great. If it's pointing down, you know, the mulch and the slurry is moved to the front of the tank, you may not empty the tank completely out. So we need to take that into consideration when we go to mix up the second tank. You know, and how many bales we put in there. But main tank's done, spitting and sputtering. We turn the pump off. We come right here. We're going to close our main tank valve. Okay, so that closes the main tank. Now the flush tank's still closed, but both handles, says right here, both handles down to flush. So both handles are down, and we're at our flush tank. Kind of hear a little bit of that water coming out, so that flush tank's open. And it's pushing water to the pump. Then we would just turn the pump back on, spray it out till it's clear water, and then shut the pump back off. And then we want to make sure we pull both of these handles back up, and then we're ready to go back to our water source and refill for our second tank. And so that's kind of the basics of the operation. I'm gonna crank the machine up again and get up here. There's some water in the main tank, or in the flush tank. So I'm going to operate that real quick for you. Again, we're at our idle. Maybe a little bit of engagement, and then we turn our pump on, and we see the water coming out. That's from the flush tank. You know, we're shooting clear water, and then it starts spitting and sputtering. We know that that's the end of the tank, so we want to go ahead and turn it off. We don't want to run that thing dry. Idle it down, and go to our water source, store our tower gun, go to our water source. Just flip the engine off. We go to our water source and do it all again. So remember, keep in mind the things that we have to do every tank or every other tank, depending on if you're using the hose or the tower gun. But we need to grease that pump. Okay, so grease hourly right there on those 5 grease points. Okay. We want to make sure we reset our flush tank and our main tank. So both of them are down. So that's pulling from the flush tank right now. So obviously when we go to spray again, we want to make sure we pull both of these up. Really, ideally, we pull these up before we even go back to the water source. Okay. So pull those things up, and then when we go to refill our water tank, our slurry tank, we want to make sure we open this up again so we get water flowing to the flush tank here. Okay, and once we get water flowing to the flush tank, it fills up again. It's going to overflow from here, but down behind the back tire, and then we'll close it, and we'll continue to mix and do things that way. So any questions? I don't think I missed anything. I'm sure I did, but there's going to be a quick start guide and a full-on manual. Again, a quick start guide here, full manual here, and then you'll also have another hardened laminated copy of a document that we, ETR Equipment, provides, and it goes into step-by-step mixing and a lot of the things we've talked about here on mixing and how to mix properly. And that sort of thing. So we want to make sure we do all those things, and then we're always here as well for any questions, or anything like that. A thing that we maybe didn't cover was, once you get done for the day, you go back to your water source. Maybe you rinse down everything that's in your tank, try to get all your mulch and everything off. This is your drain valve here. Okay, so take this here and a little water from our pond here. It's got a little bit of turbidity in it, so it's not super duper clean, but that's what we're dealing with here. And so you'll drain that out. We want to make sure, if we are putting this thing up for the day, putting it up for the winter, there are some things that we want to do for the winter, especially if we're in a really frozen climate. We want to make sure these things are really drained out really well. This is that bypass valve we talked about. If you're using your hose, you want to keep it where it's just a little crack, so if something does clog the hose, so everything's coming up from the pump and it's going out this way. This is a relief valve, recirculation valve, bypass valve, a lot of different names for it, but you leave it kind of cracked open. It's a relief valve if something were to get clogged up there. Something gets clogged in the end of your tip, and you're 200 feet out there and you can't really get back. This relief valve keeps it from continuing to build pressure and continuing to get worse and worse. So I think that covers it all. Remember, gasoline only. prefer on these 600s and 700s that we use a marine grade non-ethanol fuel. Costs a little bit more, but saves a lot of problems with the issues that ethanol has. Serial number here on the side panel. Greasing the thing daily is very, very important. So greasing it at the end of the day on your agitator bearings and that sort of thing is preferable. You've also got some bearings up top too. You see swivel bearing for your gun there and there. It's a grease point on both of those, kind of get through there. I don't know if you see it. Right in there. Let's see. Right in there, right on the side. And then up top, you can kind of see that grease point right there. Grease zerk. Similarly, you'll have some on your hose reel as well. You see it right there on the top. And those are, depending on how frequently you use it, maybe a weekly grease point or monthly grease point if you're not using it all that frequently. So, greasing the machine, washing the machine out, and not running the pump dry are three things that I would say are definitely must-dos into keeping these machines running properly and longevities and that sort of thing. When you do finish up for the day, try to get you down in the machine here and see up top here. Maybe you can see it. Maybe even a little bit of